St. Catherine of Alexandri, also known as St. Catherine of the Wheel, and the great martyr St. Catherine is, according to tradition, a Christian saint and virgin, who was martyred in the early 4th century at the hands of the pagan emperor Maxentius. According to her hagiography, she was both a princess and a noted scholar, who became a Christian around the age of 14, and converted hundreds of people to Christianity. She was martyred around the age of 18. Over 1,100 years following her martyrdom, St. Joan of Arc identified Catherine as one of the saints who appeared to her and counseled her. The Eastern Orthodox Church venerates her as a great martyr, and celebrates her feast day on 24 of the 25th of November. In the Catholic Church she is traditionally revered as one of the 14 Holy Helpers. In 1969 the Catholic Church removed her feast day from the general Roman calendar. However, she continued to be commemorated in the Roman martyrology on the 25th of November. In 2002, her feast was restored to the general Roman calendar as an optional memorial. Life. According to the traditional narrative, Catherine was the daughter of Constus, the governor of Alexandria in Egypt, during the reign of the Emperor Maximian. From a young age she had devoted herself to study. A vision of the Madonna and Child persuaded her to become a Christian. When the persecutions began under Maxentius, she went to the emperor and rebuked him for his cruelty. The emperor summoned 50 of the best pagan philosophers and orators to dispute with her, hoping that they would refute her pro-Christian arguments. But Catherine won the debate. Several of her adversaries, conquered by her eloquence, declared themselves Christians and were at once put to death. Torture and martyrdom. Catherine was then scourged and imprisoned, during which time over 200 people came to see her, including Maxentius' wife, Valeria Maximilla. All converted to Christianity and were subsequently martyred. Upon the failure of Maxentius to make Catherine yield by way of torture, he tried to win the beautiful and wise princess over by proposing marriage. The saint refused, declaring that her spouse was Jesus Christ, to whom she had consecrated her virginity. The furious emperor condemned Catherine to death on a spiked breaking wheel, but, at her touch, it shattered. Maxentius finally had her beheaded. Burial. A tradition dating to about 800 states that angels carried her corpse to Mount Sinai. Her body was discovered around the year 800 at Mount Sinai, with hair still growing and a constant stream of healing oil issuing from her body. In the 6th century, the Eastern Emperor Justinian had established what is now St. Catherine's Monastery in Egypt. Historicity. Donald Atwater dismisses the legend of Saint Catherine, citing the lack of any positive evidence that she ever existed outside the mind of some Greek writer who first composed what he intended to be simply an edifying romance. Harold T. Davis confirms that assiduous research has failed to identify Catherine with any historical personage, and has theorized that Catherine was an invention inspired to provide a counterpart to the story of the slightly later pagan philosopher Hypatia of Alexandria. Another possibility for the inspiration of Saint Catherine comes from the writer Eusebius, who wrote around the year 320. That the emperor had ordered a young Christian woman to come to his palace to become his mistress, and when she refused, he had her punished by having her banished and her estates confiscated. Although Eusebius did not name the woman, she had been identified with Dorothea of Alexandria. The earliest surviving account of Saint Catherine's life comes around 600 years after the traditional date of her martyrdom, in the Menologium, a document compiled for Emperor Basil II. Although the rediscovery of her relics at St. Catherine's Monastery at the foot of Mount Sinai was about 800, and presumably implies an existing cult at that date, The monastery was built by order of Emperor Justinian I, enclosing the chapel of the burning bush ordered to be built by Helena, the mother of Constantine I, at the site where Moses is supposed to have seen the burning bush. The living bush on the grounds is purportedly the original. It is also referred to as St. Helen's Chapel. The main church was built between 548 and 565, and the monastery became a major pilgrimage site for devotees of Catherine and the other relics and sacred sites there. St. Catherine's Monastery survives, and is a famous repository of early Christian art, architecture and illuminated manuscripts that remains open to tourists and visiting scholars. The site is sacred to Christianity and Islam. In her book, The Cult of St. Catherine of Alexandria in Early Medieval Europe, Christine Walsh discusses the historical Catherine and concludes, "As we have seen, the cult of St. Catherine of Alexandria probably originated in oral traditions from the 4th century Diocletianic persecutions of Christians in Alexandria. There is no evidence that Catherine herself was a historical figure, and she may well have been a composite drawn from memories of women persecuted for the faith. Many aspects of her passio are clearly legendary and conform to well-known hagiographical topoi." Medieval cult. St. Catherine was one of the most important saints in the religious culture of the late Middle Ages, and arguably considered the most important of the Virgin Martyrs, a group including St. Agnes, Margaret of Antioch, St. Barbara, St. Lucy, Valerie of Limoges and many others. Her power as an intercessor was renowned and firmly established in most versions of her hagiography, in which she specifically entreats Christ at the moment of her death to answer the prayers of those who remember her martyrdom and invoke her name. The development of her medieval cult was spurred by the reported rediscovery of her body around the year 800 at Mount Sinai, with hair still growing and a constant stream of healing oil issuing from her body. There are several pilgrimage narratives that chronicle the journey to Mount Sinai, most notably those of John Mandeville and Friar Felix Fabry. However, the monastery at Mount Sinai was the best-known site of Catherine pilgrimage, but was also the most difficult to reach. The most prominent Western shrine was the monastery in Rouen that claimed to house Catherine's fingers. It was not alone in the West, however, accompanied by many scattered shrines and altars dedicated to Catherine, which existed throughout France and England. Some were better-known sites, such as Canterbury and Westminster, which claimed a phial of her oil, brought back from Mount Sinai by Edward the Confessor. Other shrines, such as St. Catherine's Hill, Hampshire, were the focus of generally local pilgrimage, many of which are only identified by brief mentions in various texts, rather than by physical evidence. St. Catherine's College, Cambridge, was founded on St. Catherine's Day 1473 by Robert Woodlark, who sought to create a small community of scholars who would study exclusively theology and philosophy. Woodlark may have chosen the name in homage to Catherine of Valois, mother of Henry VI of England, although it is more likely that it was named as part of the Renaissance cult of St. Catherine, who was a patron saint of learning. At any rate, the college was ready for habitation and formally founded on St. Catherine's Day 1473. St. Catherine also had a large female following, whose devotion was less likely to be expressed through pilgrimage. The importance of the Virgin Martyrs as the focus of devotion and models for proper feminine behavior increased during the late Middle Ages. Among these, St. Catherine in particular was used as an exemplar for women, a status which at times superseded her intercessory role. Both Christine de Pizan and Geoffrey de la Tour Landry point to Catherine as a paragon for young women. emphasizing her model of virginity and wifely chastity. From the early 14th century, the mystic marriage of St. Catherine first appears in hagiographical literature and, soon after, in art. In the Western Church, concerns over the authenticity of her legend began to reduce her importance in the 18th century. Veneration. Her principal symbol is the spiked wheel, which has become known as the Catherine wheel, and her feast day is celebrated on the 25th of November by most Christian churches. However, the Russian Orthodox Church celebrates it on the 24th of November. The exact origin of this tradition is not known. In 11th century Ivan Rus, the feast day was celebrated on the 25th of November. St. Dmitry of Rostov in his Negozhitiya Svitik T1 places the date of celebration on the 24th of November, a story that Empress Catherine the Great did not wish to share her patronal feast with the leave-taking of the feast of the presentation of the Theotokos and hence changed the date, is not supported by historical evidence. One of the first Roman Catholic churches to be built in Russia, the Catholic Church of St. Catherine, was named after Catherine of Alexandria because she was Catherine the Great's patron. The 1908 Catholic Encyclopedia describes her historical importance, ranked with St. Margaret and St. Barbara as one of the 14 most helpful saints in heaven. She was unceasingly praised by preachers and sung by poets. It is believed that Jacques Benign Bossuet dedicated to her one of his most beautiful panegyrics, and that Adam of St. Victor wrote a magnificent poem in her honor, Vox Sonora Nostri Cori. In many places her feast was celebrated with the utmost solemnity, servile work being suppressed and the devotions attended by great numbers of people. In several dioceses of France it was observed as a holy day of obligation up to the beginning of the 17th century, the splendor of its ceremonial eclipsing that of the feasts of some of the apostles. Numberless chapels were placed under her patronage and her statue was found in nearly all churches, representing her according to medieval iconography with a wheel, her instrument of torture. In memory of her sacrifice in some homes, Egyptian and other Middle Eastern foods are offered for her feast, such as hummus or tabbouleh salads. Favorites also are melons cut into circles with sherbet hubs, or cookies shaped as spiked wheels with icing. Those with a more sardonic nature consume more spicy foods, either with chili pepper or curry. Meanwhile, owing to several circumstances in his life, St. Nicholas of Myra was considered the patron of young bachelors and students, and St. Catherine became the patroness of young maidens and female students. Looked upon as the holiest and most illustrious of the virgins of Christ after the Blessed Virgin Mary, it was natural that she, of all others, should be worthy to watch over the virgins of the cloister and the young women of the world. The spiked wheel having become emblematic of the saint, wheelwrights and mechanics placed themselves under her patronage. Finally, as according to tradition, she not only remained a virgin by governing her passions and conquered her executioners by wearying the patients, but triumphed in science by closing the mouths of sophists. Her intercession was implored by theologians, apologists, pulpit orators, and philosophers. Before studying, writing, or preaching, they besought her to illumine the minds, guide the pens, and impart eloquence to the words. This devotion to Saint Catherine, which assumed such vast proportions in Europe after the Crusades, received additional éclat in France in the beginning of the 15th century, when it was rumored that she had spoken to Joan of Arc and, together with St. Margaret, had been divinely appointed Joan's advisor. Devotion to St. Catherine remains strong amongst Eastern Catholics and Eastern Orthodox Christians. With the relative ease of travel in the modern age, pilgrimages to St. Catherine's monastery at Mount Sinai have increased. Pilgrims to her monastery on Mount Sinai are given a ring, which has been placed on the relics of the saint as an eulogia in remembrance of the visit. Legacy. The pyrotechnic Catherine wheel, from which sparks fly off in all directions, took its name from the saint's wheel of martyrdom. On November 25, on her traditional feast day, prayers for her intercession are given. In France, unwed women who have attained the age of 25 wear richly decorated bonnets on this day to attract potential spouses. Traditionally, only married women wore a bonnet. Unmarried women wore a chaplet, and do not assume a bonnet until the wedding. For that reason, unmarried women are said to have put on St. Catherine's bonnet. Quote, "This custom is explained by the legend. After St. Catherine converted the wife of the Roman Emperor Maxentius, she crowned the new Christian empress with a crown she took from one of the angels that had appeared to her." In art, Catherine is very frequently depicted in art, especially in the late Middle Ages, which is also the time that the account of St. Catherine's mystical marriage makes its first literary appearance. She can usually be easily recognized as she is richly dressed and crowned, as befits her rank as a princess, and often holds or stands next to a segment of her wheel as an attribute. She also often carries either a martyr's palm or the sword with which she was actually executed. She often has long unbound blonde or reddish hair. The vision of St. Catherine of Alexandria usually shows the infant Christ, held by the Virgin, placing a ring on her finger, following some literary accounts, although in the version in the Golden Legend he appears to be adult, and the marriage takes place among a great crowd of angels and all the celestial court, and these may also be shown. She is very frequently shown attending on the Virgin and Child, and is usually prominent in scenes of the Master of the Virgo into Virgins, showing a group of virgin saints surrounding the Virgin and Child. Notable later paintings of Catherine include single figures by Raphael and Caravaggio. Contemporary media. The opening scene of The Sopranos episode 38, Amor Fu, features mob wife Carmela Soprano and her daughter Mado Soprano in an art museum, where they discuss Giuseppe Ribera's painting, The Mystical Marriage of St. Catherine of Alexandria. A movie project about Catherine, called Catherine of Alexandria, began production in January 2010 and is due for release in 2014.